What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Moguls. My name is Findlay-Shirras, and on today's show, we have a young hustler building a real estate empire. So if that's kind of you, you're going to be excited for this one. And I really admire this. Check this bio out. He started his real estate journey in 2010 with an $80,000 investment, and within 7 years, he's encompassed a portfolio over $10 million, generating up to 40% annual returns on his properties in the Greater Toronto area. So if you're an investor and you want to get some returns, check him out. He invests in real estate through Mink Real Estate Capital. He buys, builds, develops, and flips homes through Mink Homes. He is a Hall of Famer at RE/MAX, and he's been featured in Canadian Real Estate Wealth Magazine, the Globe and Mail, Real Estate Magazine, and more. He is a real estate mogul, and he's not even 40 yet. All right, and if he keeps going, he's going to be a serious baller in this industry. So I hope you're as excited as I am to get to know and learn from Sahil Jaggi.
Thanks for having me, Grant.
Thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely.
So you had a really, cool background where you went to school, you did finance, you did the corporate thing, probably making really good money, and then all of a sudden you switched and you got into real estate. Why don't you let people know your story and how you got to where you are today?
So all started with school, right? When you're 17, 18 years old, they ask you to pick a profession, right? And at that time, like, finance to me was a lot more glamorous sounding, and everybody's like, hey, you got to be an investment banker, you want to be in equity capital markets. And the dream at the time was, get your degree and, get a really good job as an investment banker. So I went to Laurier. I did the 4 or 5 years at Laurier and got my degree of finance and economics, and eventually got an amazing dream job straight on Wall Street in New York City, and I moved out of Toronto and got the job that I wanted to be. So a year and a half later, I realized that it wasn't my calling at all, and the whole, I call it an 8 to 9 job. People here like to call 9 to 5. I like to call it an 8 to 9 because when you're working in finance, and this is before the housing crisis happened, so it was a lot more aggressive. The pay was amazing, but as a person who's invested 5 years into finance and also came up with a huge student debt, choice for me was like, you know what, I've gotten where I wanted to be, so this is what I wanted to do. But a year and a half later, more I sat in that job, more I realized it wasn't my calling, and the whole desk thing and suit and tie thing wasn't my thing. So I really missed my friends back home, right? Everybody I went to university with, my entire circle was here. So I ended up coming back without a plan, and all I knew was that I don't want to be behind a desk and I want a sales job. So I started applying to companies like Nestle, Hershey's, like different confectionery firms, Red Bull, and the idea was that because I heard these guys would give you a free car and you'll always be meeting new people, and to me I was like, you know what, I'll take a pay cut and I'll go into these jobs. So I ended up getting a job in Nestle Canada, and I took up a role as a corporate sales agent. I was super happy, and this was somewhere in 2009. I had a bit of money saved up from New York, so around 2010 is when I sort of transitioned into real estate. And while I was driving around working with Nestle as a sales rep, is when I started looking into real estate. And it was more like, hey, let's find a property for myself and not waste money on rent.
Some people talk about, to be successful in real estate, you got to shop. You got to practice the shopping of real estate. What does that phrase mean to you? Do you agree? And how do you shop and get to know what's good and what's bad from an investment point of view?
Absolutely, and I've heard that phrase before too, and it's 100% true. And the reason why is to a lot of people, this is the biggest purchase of their life. Unless you're looking at it from an investment perspective too. I mean, especially in Toronto, housing is not cheap. So more the research you put in, better you're going to narrow down what you want. Also, at the time of execution, I think more you research, more you shop around, more you've been out there, more you've rolled up your sleeves and actually gotten into the heart of the streets to realize what's the next best investment, more confident you will be executing that sale. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of misconceptions, there's a lot of insecurities, and a lot of people today investing into real estate, they don't know which way the market's going to go. It's already really expensive, and they're actually putting 80% of their disposable income on the line buying property. So to me, as a real estate agent, as a real estate consultant, it's important that I explain to people that how important shopping around is, how much you need to really realize that it's important to educate yourself before you make that purchase. Yeah. And that's why people who don't spend the time in shopping around, don't spend the time in doing research, don't get the right advice, end up investing in properties that are not very good, their equity that they're investing in is not growing at the fastest rate possible. And that kind of restricts them to make their next purchase. And keep in mind, an average Canadian moves 4 times in their lifetime. Starts with a condo, buys a second 2-bedroom condo, buys a house, and eventually downsizes into something else at the time of retirement. So to me, like, if you start the process right from the beginning, every purchase you make should be your stepping stone for your next property. Fundamentally, it should provide you that appreciation and enough equity growth for you to purchase your next property.
Yeah.
And to me, it all comes down to, have you shopped, have you researched, and have you done it right from the beginning?
What are your favorite sources for getting good information?
Few things, like when I narrow down areas to invest in, and the reason why I've been able to grow my portfolio from like a short $80,000 equity and today almost in 10 million is because I've successfully been able to narrow down properties. Like MLS is just not enough. MLS just gives you a sense of what's in the market, and yes, it helps you figure out what the sold comparables. Because keep in mind, Grant, I did not have my real estate license until 2015. From 2010 to 2015, I was actually just investing, right? And at the time, without the MLS, I was doing all of this research. How I did that, I think City Hall is a really good way to keep in mind what zoning changes Toronto is, just to see long-term growth plans that the city comes up with. So for example, like Etobicoke, if you go to the City Hall and you try to see what land builders are buying, what kind of new zoning bylaws are coming in on a daily basis, I think that really gives people a sense of where the next growth is coming. Also, another really good way is like if you read a lot of reports, such as, not the news, because news can be very misleading as well, and news is more about the after effects of what's already happened. When I say reports, if you go to these big firms like, Graybrook, or different people who've made it in the industry, if you try to listen to certain podcasts like yourself, try to learn from people who've been in the industry, have done it really successfully, that kind of stuff will really give you the indication of where my next property should be.
There's some really good podcasts in the States where people talk about investment, how to make money. Bigger Pockets is like a really big popular one. I don't find there's a lot of Canadian podcasters or YouTube shows that really educate people, because the landscape's different, the laws are different, the taxes are different. Do you have any particular podcasts or YouTube shows that you like or people that you follow?
To be honest, I don't follow that much podcasting within Canada, and you're absolutely right. There's a huge shortage of good quality podcasts coming into Canada, because keep in mind, in the last 6 years is when Canada has really come up on the map as a really solid place to have a real estate growth. So I think in the next coming years, good people who've made it in the industry, they should be coming out with more stuff and sharing that information with other people.
So funny, Canada's just getting there in the investment.
And Toronto being the second best city in the world to live in, like, you just can't ignore the possibilities in real estate going forward.
Toronto is, I think they're saying, like, in the next couple of years, it's going to be in a top 10 city in the world.
It already is.
If it's not already.
It already is. If you look at the boom in the tech sector, if you look at the healthcare, if you look at education, if you look at diversity, like we promote that, political stability. If you go to different countries like, Saudi Arabia, India, Colombia, anywhere you go, political stability is a big one. And Canada, and with Trump in the US now, a lot of people feel a lot more secure coming to Canada. It used to be the American dream, now it's the Canadian. So, and people who come here need a place to live. And if direct effect of that would come into Toronto's real estate market.
Cool. Now, most people when they get into real estate, they'll pick something. They'll either be a real estate agent, they'll be an investor, they'll be a fix and flipper. You seem to do all of it. Why?
Well, first and foremost, real estate's a passion of mine, right? So when I come to work every morning, I don't feel like I'm forcing myself to do it. It's just like there's so much to do. And yes, real estate has a different spectrum. To me, I think investor, you have to start off as an investor, because funny thing is, like, over 80% of real estate agents that are giving advice for people to buy homes, a lot of them don't even own homes themselves. A lot of them are not investors themselves. You have to be a believer of the product that you're selling. When I go out there and I talk to a lot of clients, they don't see me as a real estate agent. They see me as an expert who has invested and built a portfolio for himself. So a lot of the times when I'm trying to get them to buy something or believe in an investment, automatically they'll be like, okay, if it's so good, why don't you buy it yourself? And my answer at that time is I have. So I put my money where my mouth is, and that's a huge part of my sales pitch to promote that kind of investment. Because I usually recommend and promote investments in something that I've already done. So as a salesperson, you must know, like, you have to believe in the product,
Totally.
and that really helps you to move forward. Development came late at a later stage to me as my equity grew so much, because I was primarily investing in bungalows. So idea was that, why these bungalows is because a lot of the bungalows have an upside potential to them, which is a big pool of buyers when you're going out to sell these bungalows are builders. So they're buying these bungalows from you, building it and selling it. So as and when I started having I was fortunate enough to start building a lot of equity, I said, instead of selling into these bungalows, why not start building them themselves and add another stage of value add into my execution of that entire investment.
Yeah.
And that's when I moved into the office with a partner of mine who's also an architect designer, and we started looking into how to make amazing designs and look at like energy efficiency, modern construction, which is starting to take off in Toronto.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of fun doing it, and I love development and that side of real estate as well.
Now, for all the entrepreneurs out there who want to maybe do something similar and get into multiple aspects of real estate, managing all of that must be a challenge. Or why don't you talk about how do you manage the different aspects of your business from a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month? Do you have any principles? Do you have any rules, any philosophies that help you do it?
I don't want to call myself very disciplined. I'm a little eclectic in my day. Like, I start late. I'm not an early riser person, as opposed to all the successful people that are saying wake up at 6 o'clock and you'll be successful. I start my day at 10, full disclosure,
Yeah.
right? 10:30, but I work late. And part of the reason why is when people are working, it's like people are not working, that's when I get to see FaceTime with them. As a real estate person, I believe networking is a huge part of for your job, right? Whether you're meeting a contractor, whether you're meeting an electrician, whether you're meeting a high net worth investor, a lot of people finish work at 5 or 6, so you have to have a day that you have that top energy all the way up until 9 p.m. So I start the day late, I finish the day late. It's important to network because stuff that goes on in real estate, you're not learning in colleges and university. You're learning from networking. You're learning from meeting people who are in real estate. So biggest advice I would give to anybody starting in real estate, talk to more people, listen to more people who've done well. Don't get over technical reading like certain books. It's a lot to do with learning as you go and talking to the right experts. And the one thing I have learned over time is try not to be an expert at everything, which means I have a mortgage agent that I trust, I have a lawyer that I trust, I have a designer that I trust, and I have an architect that I trust. So I try to delegate work to experts as I go, and that gives me the time to focus on what my long-term goal is, and not try to get too involved in every aspect of it, and just trust the right people, hire the right people, and cost you a lot less later.
So what is your vision? What is the big long-term goal?
Long-term goal is that, I see really good optimism. Like, I'm very optimistic about Toronto's real estate. I think in certain, yes, there's certain areas that are saturated and overvalued, but there are certain pockets. There's a lot more room to grow in Toronto. As the pressure of housing is getting more and more, I think freehold land is what I have got my eye on. Like, I want to acquire more. I want to increase my portfolio, all the while keeping my cash flows break even, all the while keeping my loan to value under 65%, which is the 2 golden rules of my portfolio, right?
Okay.
So move forward, get more good real estate, good quality real estate, work with a lot more investors, as you do well and as you continue to grow your portfolio, you attract a lot of good investors to work with you. So I want to grow as a real estate agent. I've already sold more than 60 million in real estate in only 4 years. I want to help people grow their portfolios. I want to be in the business of good quality real estate investments, and that's the goal for myself and for my investors.
Cash flow break even. I mean, is it hard to find cash flow positive, or like why not try to find cash flow positive investments?
Because it's tough, right? Like in Toronto, with prices being so high, and even though rents have been really doing really well, and especially now that the affordability is a little low, a lot of people are going towards rent, which kind of just balances that increase in purchase price and increase in interest rates that you're paying, so rent sort of break even. I think it's just difficult, but yes, there's still, especially if you get out of the Toronto area, if you go into areas like Barrie, if you go into areas like Peterborough, Waterloo, London, yes, you can find cash flow positive, but as long as I am buying in good areas, and I haven't purchased anything in my entire life outside of Toronto, and the reason why is as long as it's break even, I'm okay making that compromise and focusing more on the equity growth
Got it.
rather than making cash flow positive my singular growth. And every investor is different.
Yeah.
That's just my investing style,
Interesting.
right? So some people look for cash generating properties. I look more for equity growth.
Any lessons you've learned along the way that
I would say tons.
you wish you wouldn't?
I wish I had more time to give you the entire list, but I'll give you the top three.
Okay.
Like I said, again, I would mention this to everybody. Don't ever compromise working with the experts. Sometimes, whether it's your real estate agent, whether it's a mortgage agent, whether it's your contractor, whether it's architects, anybody that you're hiring to do a job for you, try to look at the history of the person, try to look at how he's done it successfully. And even though it might seem that you're paying a little bit more upfront as a commission to hire a right person to do the job, it costs you a lot less in the beginning. And I've learned that the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
When I was only an investor, I was working with a lot of wrong real estate agents giving me wrong advice and could have potentially costed me a lot more. Same with lawyers. Want to have good people on your team. They will eventually, in the long run, help you grow.
What's your way of finding those people?
I think it's more hit or miss. You meet a lot of people, and over the last 8 years, I think I can safely say I've got a good sense of who knows this stuff and who doesn't.
You have some go-to questions that you ask?
Yeah, a lot of go-to questions such as how long have you been in the business? Like to hear people's success stories. I go to a lot of networking events where you get to meet people who are, optimistic, fresh. You just like have that hustle in them, and even though they're successful, they're always looking to improve themselves. And there's always good people out there. So you meet. On an average, I'll meet 5 to 7 new people a week, right? And that gives you that ability to really narrow down on the people that have really done well for themselves. And that's given me the ability to meet the right people.
So let's go into the GTA real estate market a little bit more.
Sure.
So some people think there's a school of thought that in the next maybe as early as 5, but maybe 10, 15 years, Toronto will actually either cap out or go down in price as self-driving cars come out, as public transport becomes faster so that people don't need to be so much in the city centers and everything starts sprawling out across. Do you think, it is overpriced? What do you think, what will happen for the price for stuff in Toronto? Or do you see growth and where?
Personally, I believe in diversification. Right, and coming from a person who hasn't invested outside of Toronto, maybe it's time for me to look at diversifying and going outside of Toronto. I just don't find it, like if you talk about 2019 today, I still think there's a lot more room to grow within Toronto. But needless to say, as technology is coming and fast trains are coming into play, and Toronto is starting to improve their much needed improvement in transportation system and connecting different GTA spots to come into the downtown core. But that's more of a long run, like 5 to 10 year model for me. Yeah. But in the next 5 years, I think if you're trying to be closer to the core, there's a lot more room to grow. Let me ask you a simple question. I mean, during this entire time, even the housing crisis for that matter, how much did Manhattan depreciate?
Even in 2008, 2009?
Barely anything.
Really?
Because keeping close to the core is the essence. Like when people shout out location, 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 that always comes down to being closer to the core. Another big reason is that there's a lot of immigration influx coming into the country, right? We're immigration friendly country. We're getting thousands of people wanting to come into Toronto and coming into the country. These people who come into the new city, if you really talk to them, if you really understand their psychology, they don't know Barrie, they don't know Brampton, and they don't know like these other. A person who's coming from thousands of miles away, they recognize Toronto. And knowing that the city promotes diversification, in a lot of ways, they recognize Toronto as being the second home. They want to start off in Toronto. So any person who's coming from real far away is going to feel safer and more secure being in the city. Eventually, once they need space, and then yes, Toronto is going to hit saturated, and Toronto is going to start getting cramped for space. They're going to start looking for their second big home elsewhere. But the starting point to me is always Toronto for a lot of people, whether it's renting, whether it's owning.
Yeah.
So I'm still a strong believer in the fact that Toronto is still the place to be, and there are pockets in Toronto that are still very affordable and you can still get in.
What are your favorite pockets?
There's certain areas within the West End. There's certain areas like Birchcliff or something on the East End. Danforth's still a very good pocket. I think if you still buy a nice bungalow for like $750, with 20% down, you can have that break-even model still give, and I think this still has a little bit room to grow. And then there's tons of other areas. This Queensway Stonegate area that are really good. I mean, there's pockets of Port Credit that are still affordable. So you can go on with the list. But yes, it's important to stay away, and it's important to understand where to pick the right property, right? And that's where working with the right professional comes in. You also don't want to invest in areas that are already too oversaturated.
Yeah.
And there are different metrics to look at that, that I sit and discuss with a lot of people.
Is there any stuff that you have seen that's overpriced?
There are areas such as Yonge and Shepherd, Yonge and Eglinton, and obviously if you look at like the Forest Hill areas and those areas, I think is just really, really extra luxury areas that are oversaturated.
Yeah.
There are areas such as like High Park or even Leslieville that are touching that point where I would say there's oversaturation.
Yeah.
But then there's other areas which are logistically placed very similar to these other areas, so such as, like I said, Long Branch is one of my favorite neighborhoods to invest in. Logistically, it's placed within the exact same distance to downtown, and the cost of owning a bungalow is a lot less. To me, that shows that there's room to grow. Yeah. But you have to look at other metrics too, like how far is it from the TTC GO and access to highways and malls and different stuff.
And how do you, and so you just manually do the research to put all those metrics together?
I'm very hands-on, very
hands-on.
Excel
spreadsheets and...
Excel spreadsheets and everything is fun, but I actually believe in taking the car and just driving around. Okay. I'll go into different streets of different neighborhoods. I'll see what kind of cars are parked on the driveway, what kind of construction's coming into the driveway, what are how many houses in the street are developed versus how many houses still are small bungalows. I have different metrics that I use.
Now we got a lot of startups and tech people watching this, some of which are creating cool stuff that you might be using now, or they're thinking about creating some stuff for the future. So when you think about tech and real estate, in the last couple years, has there been any tech that you have implemented that has been a game changer for you, that you've really enjoyed? And has really helped your business?
This might sound really stupid, but I use Google Earth a lot.
Okay.
Right, I like to see this, usually before I go see any house, I'll always Google Earth it, see where it's placed. I'll try to see how far is it from the water, highways. It's a good way to really give you a kind of sense of the area. Yeah. Other tech stuff, my assistant's a lot better at stuff like that. We'll look at Geo Warehouse, we'll look at impact reports. We'll look at increases in property taxes over the last few years. So we have different metrics just to narrow down certain neighborhoods.
Is there anything that you've heard about that maybe isn't quite there yet, that when you think about the future of real estate, the future of investing, how tech might be playing a role and what you're excited about?
Absolutely. I think tech is something that we can't ignore today. I think it's definitely changing and shaping up our industry. But I don't think I'm that well versed with what kind of tech stuff that's coming up. I think it's definitely something for me to refresh, and maybe I can chat with you more. You can give me some insight on that.
Well,
stuff.
So have you seen, I wonder, when you look at Google Earth and Google Street View, sometimes a little outdated.
Yes.
Have you heard of realtors now using that 3D or 360 cameras or 3D virtual technology to actually now create their own Google Earth and Street View that's actually...
I've seen it, and obviously
yesterday.
The drone helps, right?
Yeah.
The drone technology is definitely out there. I know the 3D walkthrough technology is out there.
Yeah.
For people to see the houses on the inside, I haven't seen yet a 3D walkthrough enough that gives you a little bit more of a streetscape. Yeah. Right? I think that kind of technology is definitely something that we need to incorporate just to give a more idea about what the street looks like. And yes, most of the time Google is very outdated. So you might be looking at a home that is, you kind of want to get a sense of what the neighbors are there. And a lot of the time, these homes are built already, and the Google's showing houses from 2-3 years ago. Yeah. So,
is there any challenges that you are this is a pain point for me right now in my business, or it's a pain point for my clients, and there's got to be a way that this can be solved, it just hasn't been solved yet?
I actually like the fact that Treb allowed a lot of people to show the sold data out there. I'm not opposed to it at all. And a lot of real estate agents are hey, that's something that we should have. But I think to me, that's more you're insecure about the value that you provide to your client. I don't think just showing them the comparables is the only value that you can provide. I think that's a good way for people to be a little bit more transparent and out there. Yeah. A lot of the pain point for me, I think I'll tell you straight up, I think my pain point is that there's a lot of misconceptions about pre-construction. I am not, to me, like there's a lot of nonsense about pre-construction. A lot of people are just running towards pre-construction because they just don't know anything else that is better to buy. I think the whole marketing presentation center, you walk in, you have the fresh beverages, and you have a person just showing you the floor plans and sign here and the 5% for the next 2 years is just the easy way for buying real estate. It's a very difficult conversation to have to get a person to get out of that headspace and look into resale. Because I think pre-construction is just really, from 2010 to 2016, you could be on a plane and throw a dart in Toronto and everything's increased. So a lot of people who made money in pre-construction it's very easy sell for them based on what's happened in the last 6 years. But today, buying pre-construction, expecting that same kind of growth and you selling the property in 2020 is a very unrealistic model to me. So biggest pain point, I think it's an advice to a lot of people, be very, very careful about pre-construction. And personally, I would say like there's 1 out of 50 pre-constructions out there that I would recommend as an investment. Because if you calculate the per square feet that these builders are charging, they're actually doing it in a way that they're expecting that same appreciation 5 years from today and charging you that price today. That's very unrealistic, that's very short-sighted, and that's not very savvy investments.
Interesting. What do you have you heard about, did you hear the news about how Amazon bought Lennar Homes, or partnered with Lennar Homes, the largest home builder?
I did not.
So Amazon has a real estate division and a mortgage division now, and they just partnered with Lennar Homes, which is the largest home builder. And I wonder what they're going to get into.
Scary to think, but let's see, right? I mean,
their goal is to get Alexas. So when they build homes, they build it smart.
Right.
And they build it with Alexas in it, so that you just start buying everything through Prime.
Right.
It's a Prime house.
I haven't heard of that, but that's very interesting. I mean, Amazon's a game changer in any field they go, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the plan when they bought even Whole Foods, right? How to like have that whole healthy food delivered at home model. So I have not heard of that. Something I should be looking into.
Yeah, Facebook wants to get into real estate.
Yeah, I mean, they
Google,
already have a division
Apple.
That's doing a lot of rentals through Facebook now.
They
have a huge platform for people to find rentals now, right? Advertise your rentals on Facebook and stuff like that. Kijiji is a big one, but Facebook's also already pretty big into the real estate space.
What do you think about the home ownership data that keeps coming out, where it's like everyone is just not wanting to own as many homes, but short-term rentals and fractionalized ownership and crowdfunding for real estate is actually on the rise? What do you see that trend continuing and just getting even more lopsided, where you're like, great, more people are going to want to put money into real estate and invest? Like, what do you think about?
I think there are different cycles of real estate. You have to just make sure what cycle you're on, right? Today, if we really talk about it, affordability is a big problem in Toronto. And the reason why that's happened is because government that took actual measures to make affordability better, they've actually made it worse. Mortgage regulations, stress tests, and these different techniques that they were trying to introduce to control the prices, they actually backfired the affordability. So a lot of people don't have a choice, right? I don't think there's still a huge appetite for real estate, especially with people who are coming from different countries and immigrants. They enjoy buying the aspect of buying real estate, right? Because back home, owning land is one of the biggest dreams of any immigrant to come into the country. And to do it in the second best city in the world with available financing is amazing. But more and more, the government's introducing these laws that I think a lot of them have backfired and made affordability a little worse. And I think eventually they're going to have to either reverse them or they're going to have to introduce other laws that makes affordability better. Question is not if the prices are up or down. How is that affecting affordability is a completely different way to calculate it, right? So I think short-term rentals and this kind of the Airbnb and people landlords buying, and that's also coming because Toronto is attracting a lot of tourists. Toronto is starting to become a trendy, cool city for people to visit. And that's driving up the short-term rentals. And that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, a lot of people I know are doing really well with their ROIs, investing in renting it out to short-term rentals.
We could probably go on forever because I love learning about real estate.
I can go on forever. I can talk about real estate forever.
How can people get in touch with you so they can get to know you? Maybe they can invest with you, buy with you, sell with you, or just get to know you and learn from you?
Very easy. Just Google me. I mean, I'm usually all over. Otherwise, my website is www.minkrealty.ca. Very easy to find on the internet. If you ever need advice, no obligation, you can even get in touch with me, and I'm happy to give advice. As Grant said, I love talking about real estate. You guys must have gotten the sense. I can go on all day. So my biggest advice to everybody is don't fall into the misconceptions of real estate. Talk to somebody who really understands it, somebody who's really done it, and somebody who's an expert at it. That will really help you, and find mentors that can really help you. Even today, I have 2 or 3 mentors that I always take advice from, and they really help you create a shortcut to be successful in real estate. Yeah. It's one of the industries that even a doctor, lawyer, IT guy, anybody can be in real estate and create passive wealth for themselves. Yeah. So I would say it's something that somebody should plan in a lot in advance, and there's a lot of 20-year-olds and millennials that are scared about getting into real estate, but if your planning is right, then I'm sure you can get into it in the next coming years and get your feet wet and eventually create a good portfolio for yourself.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Real Estate Moguls. As always, if you want to get to know more experts in the industry so you can be great in real estate, then subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube show, click that bell icon, and share this with your friends so they can kind of get the insight, because it's a great place to make money and improve the quality of your life. All right, so stay tuned for more episodes, but thanks so much
for
being on the show.
Good talking to you. Yeah.